Let's talk about some Leagues Cup because we're in the quarterfinals. Philadelphia taking on Querétaro. We have Inter Miami taking on Charlotte. Nashville versus Minnesota. We'll talk about the Nashville game against Club America very quickly. And then LAFC is taking on Monterrey. So of the final 8, 6 are from MLS, 2 are from Mexico. And there's also some other news here where Messi's MLS debut is postponed because of the Cup run. MLS announced today that Inter Miami, their MLS match against Charlotte, actually, originally scheduled for Sunday, August 20th in Fort Lauderdale, has been postponed to a later date because both of them are advanced in the quarterfinals, and they will be playing against each other on August 19th. So in either the Leagues Cup final or the third place match, I guess there's some issues there. So that's been delayed. And I guess the big question for both of you, and Heath, I'll come to you first, is MLS, is Inter Miami's third priority this season essentially Leagues Cup, U.S. Open Cup semifinals now, and then where they suck ass right now is in the league? What's their plan? What do you think their plan is? Or just to win everything and score 18 goals every game?
I mean, if you're Inter Miami, you want to keep this momentum going as much as possible. If you're the league, you want this momentum going as possible because it's a much bigger lift for them to do something within the actual league play, right? This tournament is something that can at least carry some momentum and some sustained eyeballs because there's consequence, right? When Messi gets back into the league, it's going to take a couple of wins before people start to go, okay, there's an opportunity for a run here. Let's tune in to see can he claw back the points, or can he and the team claw back the points to get into a playoff position. But we ultimately know how they've got a long ways to go to be able to do that. But in this one, just in terms of the quarterfinals, it's a really interesting one. The schedules have been difficult. There's been a lot of changes. Obviously, you talked about it, Jimmy. A lot of the Liga MX teams have been complimentary of the competition, but the format itself, I think, has been challenging. Right? You get into these rounds and you look at Monterrey having to cover as much ground as they're covering. And some of the teams in terms of travel in a short amount of time, not knowing exactly, are we playing today? Are we playing tomorrow? 4 days out or 5 days out, I think makes a big difference in terms of planning and changing things. We've also seen some delays because of weather and all that kind of stuff. So it's been, I think, a challenge, but some really good games have been taking place since the knockout rounds. So, I don't know where you want to go with this topic, Jimmy, specifically, if we want to just kind of do a little bracket run and then talk about potential changes or what we like.
Let's do a little bracket run. LAFC Monterrey is interesting, but to the point of, let me just say the quote from the Monterrey president, who said a game date is changed. This is Jose Antonio Noriega. A game date is changed, which was set for the 12th and was moved ahead to the 11th. With all the kilometers that we've had on us, we're still alive and traveling to Los Angeles. We're going to accumulate a number of kilometers that isn't fair. There's a great need to be equitable because I don't want to talk too much, but if we move on after Los Angeles, I'm sure we're going to go to the other side of the country, so it's crazy. I'm speaking for all the Mexican teams, which have suffered various setbacks. Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with the guy, but we'll get into his statement a little bit more.
It's a lot less, I just want to bring it up. Kilometers, Jimmy, if you convert it into miles, just so he knows. If you want to justify it a little bit easier, convert kilometers to miles, and it's a lot less,
Yeah. Come on, Tato Noriega. Got to convert that. So that'll be interesting. I mean, I like all the home teams, frankly. Philly to get the job done against Querétaro. We got Inter.
They put a beating on Philly. For those that don't know, the opening game, Philly put I think it was 4-1 or I think maybe 5-1 beating on Querétaro, who looked like just a bunch of old dudes on the field. They've then grinded out results. Even going into this tournament, I think their last game, they got beat 3 or 4-1 also in Liga MX. So they weren't in a good place, but they've been able to sort of turn things around in this one between these two teams. But I'm with you, Jimmy, on this. I like all the home teams to move forward.
Yeah, so Chuck, let's go into the format. Do you like the format of Leagues Cup? How are you feeling about this? I mean, the obvious one is that it's something we've been clamoring for from the beginning. It just would be cool if MLS teams had to travel to Mexico and that they had to, for lack of a better phrase, suffer as well, like these Mexican league teams are, for all the traveling that they have to do and not having their home fans support them, even though there are a lot of fans that do come to these games. And any rule changes that you'd like to see or format changes?
I think home and away would be fair.
Mm-hmm.
So MLS teams,
wait, when you get into the knockout rounds or group stages?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes. I mean, either or. So maybe the next version of this Leagues Cup is entirely played in Mexico. And then you can balance the two. And so now you have some good data to say, hey, this is how it worked when all the matches were in the States versus all the matches in Mexico. And the third iteration has the home and away. And I think that would be super fair because all the Mexican sides, they don't want to travel every time. Like that. Where's the, I mean, the competitive advantages with the MLS teams that goes without saying. And you could say, oh, well, the Mexican teams don't have salary restrictions, but we're talking about just competing on the pitch. And I think the Mexican sides are at a disadvantage because you're playing in the States away from home every single game, away from your fans. You may have some fans that come to the matches, but it's not the same as playing at home.
Yeah.
You sleep in your own bed.
Yeah, and that's
same
like
routine.
six of the super teams get those types of fans to show up.
Yes.
Anywhere.
And I think the advantage for the MLS sides is now you're getting a chance to play in those environments. That builds that resilience and the experience you get from that, so that a lot of these MLS players who are American can take that with them to grow and maybe eventually play with the U.S. Men's national team. And you already have that experience of playing in a difficult environment in Mexico against the top team. That's what drives you forward. You want those type of matches. I loved playing away from home as much as I loved playing in front of your home supporters and your family and your home. I loved playing in those full stadiums where everyone's against you. I fed off of that energy. I loved it. And I think playing in those difficult environments would only benefit the MLS sides.
Yeah, I agree with you theoretically. There's a big conversation to be had, and Heath is a resident business dude, where they could argue, or MLS could argue, that we're going to make more money on this whole thing if we have the games in the States, whereas it might be harder to do and generate that same type of income in Mexico. I don't even know if that's true or not.
I mean, that's
okay. That's
I mean, it's like saying, well, it would be great if Mexico played all their national team games in Mexico. You go, why don't they do that? And you're like, well,
right.
There's obvious reasons why you don't do that.
Yeah. So that's going to be a hard thing because we know that money drives a lot of the decision making. So in terms of the competitive balance, yeah, that would be amazing, Chuck. And I hope that happens. And I think that it would be good for the players and for the clubs. But I could see a lot of coaches being, we're not going to go to Mexico for 4 or 5 weeks if they make it all the way to the final. And, it'd be interesting.
I think that would be a good solution. For me, what I'd like to see generally is, again, one of the things Monterrey is talking about, right, is LAFC have been rewarded. They're on their third game of the tournament versus Monterrey's fifth, right? LAFC are playing at home, and you start to stack a lot of details that I think play into their favor that are, maybe in some ways warranted because of the way that they qualified in, but in other ways just feels like a little bit of or a massive disadvantage when you start to add things together. I personally think that knockout rounds have been really good quality because, you get a little bit of that sniff of like, oh, where could we be? Whereas what I'd love to see is finding a way for it to be 4-team groups, even if that's a home and away. And even if, the first half of those games, first 3 games out of the, 16 games you would play, maybe those are throughout the year. And the other 3 go into a window of time where you play those 3 out and then you play out the knockout rounds or something like that. Because if you don't make it different than the CONCACAF Champions Cup, then it's the same, Right. So if you can get into a 4-team group, because that will, I think the 3-team groups made it really difficult at times where when you go straight to penalties, I thought maybe the dynamic of games shifted earlier towards like staying with this, knowing that you're going to get a point or 2 points. And that if you could get 3 points out of 2 games, you could qualify for the next round. And so for me, it just kind of lacked a little bit more of what we see in a World Cup or whatever, to have full group play where you have 4 teams in a group and you're kind of navigating that, right? And then you have more than the quality, you have the storylines over 4 games that you don't have when it's 3 games, right? It's sort of like it's sort of like 3 teams and it's somewhat friendlies, and whoever goes, 2 teams go through and whatever. It's just, it lacks a little bit of that like story. And so for me, it lacked a little bit of, it was a little bit challenging for me to find the storylines, right? It was a little bit hard to find the brackets and how it all played out. Like there was just a complexity for me that was a little bit overwhelming at times. And I'm working in it. So I would love to see, a little bit more proper group play. Again, I'm thinking about this through the lens of like not actually thinking through how you would put 4 groups in every.
No, I get it.
Every group, mathematically, but that I think would bring some more, dynamic to set up the knockout rounds in a different way.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult because there's 47 teams, I think, that participated. So you would need either one more and not give buys to the teams that have earned it through winning their leagues or whatever it is, like LAFC did. And,
Well,
and was it
add
Puebla
somebody
for
from
Mexico?
another league. I'll call the
Well,
league winner from Costa Rica.
Well, that would be sick. But also, how about USL? Whoever wins USL gets to pop into the Leagues Cup, which I think would be pretty sick.
I don't think that's happening, but like
that's never happening. But it would be awesome. If we're talking romanticism and not being held to any rules or standards or relationships or politics, then yeah, that would be cool. But they'd have to get to 48 and they'd have to figure out how that was going to make it work. But I'm picking up what you're putting down for sure. And I do think there will be some changes. The VAR stuff with Club America and Nashville, that took like way too long to acknowledge that guy stepped off his line, the goalkeeper for Club America. And so there's just a whole bunch of different things. I know that Liga MX put out a statement too, talking about how everything just needs to improve, including the refereeing and a lot to unpack. But I feel like we're starting to tap into the emotional rivalry that is natural between U.S. and Mexico, and that's what I think they wanted to get to with Leagues Cup between the two teams. And now it's nice to see that the Mexican clubs are like, you know what? Now that we're here in the knockout rounds, this is getting
you got to win
a little more competitive. Yeah, you got to win.
Yeah.
Like there's
you
now
can't go this far and lose. Like you make it worth it.
Yeah,
we're beating ourselves up. We're traveling to the States. We're winning this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's being jaded.
Who's the ideal final for you? What's the ideal final? Miami, Monterrey.
That would be pretty sick at Fort Lauderdale.
I mean, I would love to see, Miami, Monterrey, or Miami, LAFC. I'll take those two.
That would be a good one too.
Final, because you got the champions against like the darlings.
Yeah.
And like LAFC are pumping people right now, and they're good right now, and they have not been great.
Yeah, they're playing pretty well right now.
They were slumping for a while there.
Yeah,
they were slumping for a while. It was looking ugly. It was probably what's delaying, I think, probably a new deal for Steve Trundlow is not the form that they were in. I know we got to jump over to the break, Jimmy, but like the last thing I would say around this is, again, format wise, you saw LAFC get the advantage of getting a break, whereas Pachuca got the break, came in, lost one game, and they're out, and now they've got another 3 weeks to figure out what they're going to do. So I don't even think maybe teams see that as an advantage in some ways, unless you can make the most of the advantage.